Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Just offering some words. Thank you so much for coming to today's initial talk. It's the first time that the Listening to Indigenous Voices action team is putting a program together. So I'm very excited. I am glad to support Kathy, Bill, and Tamara, who have been working hard to get this team going. I'm Karina Ramirez. I am CCL's Diversity and Inclusion Director. So I am just extremely pleased to see that we have different areas of interest. And for us, it was very important that we began learning from Indigenous communities. So with that, I will pass it on to Kathy.
Thanks, Karina. I'd like to point out Matt is from Long Beach, has been working with us as we tried to put together a team that would be both educational and respectful for getting to know Indigenous peoples and communities, including Indigenous CCL volunteers. And if anybody identifies as Indigenous, please let us know if you want to. So I'm a she, her, and live in the Yellowstone Valley in Montana, which is a traditional homeland of the Crow people. They called the Yellowstone the Elk River. And there's other tribes who spent time here. This is a very nice place. And it's also close to Yellowstone Park, where there were ceremonies took place besides hunting. I'd like to especially mention the Northern Cheyenne, for whom this is not traditional homelands, but they were assigned land a couple of hours east of here after they separated from the Cheyenne who were incarcerated, and they became the Southern Cheyenne, and the Northern Cheyenne broke out from Fort Robinson in Nebraska on January 9th, 1879. And our first speaker is Northern Cheyenne tribal member. And I would like to, before I turn it over to Adrian, mention that we are doing this sort of as an immersion kind of thing, where instead of having a lecture where our speakers are going to say, you should do this and you shouldn't do that. Well, Adrian might say that, but it's we're trying to be holistic, which is the Indigenous worldview, instead of linear, which is the Western. That CCL is pretty linear, it's pretty Western. And so in order to understand your Indigenous communities, doing so in a holistic way, we thought it would work better. So you might hear, you might listen for issues that have to do with tribal identity and sovereignty, the diversity of Native peoples, tribes, and nations, that they're not monolithic. You need to know something about the colonial and pre-colonial history of people that you are doing outreach to or working with. Decolonization is right up there. And climate and environmental issues are linked with decolonization. And then the whole idea of indigenous, which means land-based, which is a different way of looking at climate issues than not land-based. So I want to introduce Adrian Jawort, she, her, and I left out so I could read it. Adrian is a two-spirit journalist, author, and editor, among other things, who lives in Billings, Montana, and she will share her views and understanding of historical and contemporary issues. Okay. And we're going to have questions. You may formulate your questions and put them in the chat. And Bill is our moderator for the questions. Yeah, Bill Barron from Salt Lake, the Western Mountain West Mountain West region. Let's see. That Adrian is co-founder of the Native American Race Relations Healing and Lecture Series that takes place in Montana, and founder of the Off the Pass Press. And I recommend her anthologies of Indigenous writers that she might mention to you. And the other thing I want to say is that Adrian can be challenging. She is a truth teller, and her writing is provocative. And so Adrian, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Am I on camera now? Okay. Yeah, my name's Adrian Jawort, and I'm Titista Hamane, which means two-spirit Cheyenne. Tistas is the Cheyenne, our word for ourselves, really. And Hamane is our word for two-spirit, which basically means one whose heart is that of a woman. No, we're born biologically male. So just to get that out of the way. And since everyone's curious, two-spirit, I should explain that. It's just kind of a pan-indigenous term that they created. They based it off an Ojibwe term. That was their literal translation, was two-spirit person, and they had it at a conference, which they replaced the word berdache. That's the anthropological term they're using. It's like if you look up all the history books or whatever, all the academic papers, it'll always say berdache, Berdache, and that was kind of like a really insulting name. Really, it was like a French term that they translated from the Persian, from Persian, basically meant like Arab slave boy or something. And and that was the word they were using for a long time, since that was just the word that the French trappers came up with, and it just kind of stayed that way until about 1989, and they changed it. They said, no, we can't use that term as a whatever to describe native trans people, or so about two-spirit. And so eventually two-spirit, this became kind of an all-encompassing term for the LGBTQ community. And like some people that native people won't identify as two-spirit, like a Cheyenne person might not say, well, I'm Hamane, because think about that, as a Hamane person in the Northern Cheyenne tribe and lots of tribes, we really held like almost like a sacred aspect to us, almost like I want to say the word shamanistic kind of, role in society. Very carefully listen to people, and like Catherine says, it's you're basically a truth teller and everything, and you're also the person, that was like a go-between between sexes. Like if you're ever going to get married, you were the go-between counselor and everything, all like that. And you led ceremonies and everything. And that's something a lot of tribes, that's one of the first things the colonization did, was really drive that out of them. was like the very Judeo-Christian society. They'd see these two-spirit people around. They're just like, no, we can't have that. We, and one of the most interesting stories I always say is right where I'm Absalica, well, Crow land anyway, which is actually this Billings land. The specific name they had for it was I can't pronounce the Crow, but it was, since we have these rim rocks surrounding us, it's like these big cliffs. They just call them the cliffs with no name, are the cliffs with no pass. Since you couldn't get them up, you had to go around them. Anyways, uh, so the Crow tribe, they about the 1890s, and the Crow tribe had always been like allies with whites. They just kind of left each other alone and back and forth, whatever. And they're kind of infamous for scouting for Custer, even though, it was just basic survival for them and everything. And they were surrounded by every tribe didn't like them. They were like the last tribe that had like this beautiful valley with buffalo and elk left and everything. And it was just like everyone wanted that land. So they were just kind of at war with everyone. So I'm always like, although we give the Crow a hard time and everything, other tribes do. It's like I'm always empathetic to that viewpoint, and that's something that we have to always recognize is amongst native tribes and everything. It's like we have this tendency, this kind of all lump them together. And, oh, they're all. This is the Native American way. Oh, they're all just indigenous, but it's very, very distinct languages, distinct cultures. It would be like telling a Cheyenne they're, oh, you're a Crow native. And it's like, no, it's, or, they're basically the same. It's like, no, their languages sound way different. They have like different afterlife beliefs, or just for instance, like you don't talk of the dead in the Crow tribe, whereas my Cheyenne tribe would always just do it. So there's different taboos in each tribe and everything. But also like, eh, also like, oh, sorry. Someone just walked by. I lost my train of thought. Uh, he was quick.
It's a lot of stuff. So we'd have to see if we're interested in a Friday night. I mean, that's what we have to head for.
I just muted her, so you're off, Adrian.
Oh, okay. Okay. So different distinct tribes. I always use the comparison. It'd be like telling a German person, "Oh, you're just like the French person." They'd be like, "No, we're not. It's way different." I mean, so that's one of the comparisons I always use. Just because you're both white or have the same skin color, it's like, no, it's a lot different anyway. But I was back to that story. So about 1890s, Crow tribe had this these two spirit people in their tribe. They were like, one of them was really highly respected. His name was Finds Them and Kills Them. That was the name he earned. So that's, these are like this, in a military touristic tribe like the Crow. I mean, they're a really revered person with a name like that. But this Indian agent, he sees this two spirit person. Is like, no, we can't have that. And there's like a group of them. So he takes them all, puts them in jail, chops their hair off, and then like has them start doing, puts them in man's clothes and has them doing manual labor and everything. And the Crow tribe was just like, they were like shocked. They were pissed off. Like one of their chiefs came all the way across the reservations and you get this Indian agent out of here. Otherwise, that was like unheard of. It was almost like a revolt over this two spirit person. They were going to stand up for him. And that was like, it just didn't make sense to him. I always say, it's like you had this belief system in the sands of the Middle East, all the way across Asia, Europe, all the way across an ocean, and all the way across North America, and smack dab in the middle of Montana, thousands of miles away. Said, no, these people are wrong. And it's like, we've had these people for hundreds, thousand years, and you're telling it just didn't click to them that two spirit people were natural and inherent. This is the way they were. We leave them alone. So I always use that as an illustrative example, is that Finds Them and Kills Them was, they all stood up for her, and that was it. But of course, the colonization, kids get ingrained in the boarding schools and everything. It's like, oh, these people are bad, their people are bad, and they're taught from a young age that they were not Christian, whatever, because there's always Christian boarding schools. It's like there's a story in the Carlisle Indian boarding school. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that in Pennsylvania. Like one of the mottos there was "Kill the Indian, save the man" there. And there's all these little kids there, and there's like this Navajo Two Spirit child. I mean, in the Navajo, they call them the Nadalehe, I think. I know how to spell it. I can't ever pronounce these words, but it's like they were protected by the other little kids because they, and I always think I always had to write. I wrote about a fiction story. It's like, this is their almost like their secret. There's their pushback to colonization is this little Two Spirit kid. And the Navajo tribe, it was just like Two Spirits were like, I remember reading this one of they were basically practical deities. They were so well respected and everything amongst their tribes. They were just like goddesses, I mean, I would say goddesses or but I just remember the word deities. They were treated so like revered and everything, and they're just little, so the parents are like, oh, our child's a Two Spirit. Oh, that's cool, So naturally they're gonna send it naively as they send the child to school as dressed in female clothes. And then they had this lice outbreak, and then they scrubbed down every single kid, and they found out the child was biologically female, and they just flipped out on the child and everything. And it was the cousin telling the story, and she just like said to this day she was just like visibly shocked and outraged. She was just like, they took my cousin and I'd never seen, because they were just like brother and sister tight, and she never saw him again. It was just like traumatic, and that was the message: you do not do this. These people are bad. And then even after that, it just became like eventually erased from native societies and everything. So yeah, and that's one thing colonization really did, was like that was one of the first people they targeted, beginning from the earliest conquistadors. When they showed up, it was like one of the things they would do is it was like you could take, I mean, doctrine of discovery is like really widely debated. It was like okay, you could take their lands if they're cannibals or practice incest or sodomy, and they'd see all these effeminates walking around, and they're like in temples and held high places. That became almost pretty much a go-to reason, just to blanket, take all these people's lands and everything. Otherwise, because it said that doctrine of discovery was kind of like debated amongst the more liberal scholars and priests, that this isn't right, that we're just taking people's land. These are actual people with human civilizations. They're not just total savages and everything. But that became the primary reason for, and that goes all the way up to California and everything, these conquistadors. And then, yeah, and there's like stories like in this late 1700s where this priest saw um, this chief having, sex with a Two Spirit person. The priest was like, what are you doing? He said, oh, that's one of my wives. And and so then he said, I punished the chief severely, although not as much as I wanted to, so I'm guessing they whipped him. He said, that's kind of became their goal, to eradicate those people from the land. And then said by about the 1820s, about 30, 40 years later, they were just like happy to report that there's no more Two Spirit people. That's how much they drove them underground. And of course, Judeo-Christian values coming from the East, from the other side, just kind of doing the same thing until we're all just, yeah. Anyways, yeah, I told Catherine I kind of ramble off on things, but
I love the way you're telling stories, because it's such a good way to learn. We remember stories.
Yeah, it can illustrate the whole point. It sticks in your head better. Okay, rather than just me reading from a textbook.
Yeah. Now, you wrote. You have written about how Two Spirit people are not necessary. I mean, decolonization has not happened in a lot of places. like in rural instead of, you were telling me about the difference between how Two Spirits people are received in cities versus on reservations.
Oh yeah, that's because a lot of all of us Two Spirit people, like even in Billings, even people around here, it's very conservative. Would we vote like only 33% voted for Hillary in 2016? I'm sure the numbers are same this year. But it was just like, yeah, and people see me here and they see that I'm trans and they're like, why are you here? You know, even white people are like that. You know, they're like, shouldn't you be in a big city, or at least Missoula, which is the more liberal town? And are like, well, you know, I just always think of it, well, you know, this is my land. I have to, you know, be, uh, yeah, kind of fight for it in a metaphorical sense, whatever. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, even on rural reservations, that's one thing people like. It's like Sherman Alexie said it. He's a Washington Spokane native, but he said this one thing about people don't understand about natives is a lot of us are really redneck in our beliefs. And that's what I wrote this one article. It's called Native American Rednecks. And that was actually where I came out as trans. I had to like just throw in that story, that illustrative part. Said, I know this because I am that person. I mean, I've been, why am I afraid to come out? Why am I suppressing this? And it is because of this constant Judeo-Christian colonization. I mean, like the evangelicalism is like really huge on native reservations and everything. And yeah, and I guess one of the things I started doing more and more native activism and everything. It's like I found another Two Spirit person on her reservation. Um, oh, I should say, they're trans now. His reservation, Stephen Bear Two Teeth. Uh, yeah, they kind of came to me. I mean, I came to them. I said wanted to do like some, you know, just events with us or whatever, or start like speaking in halls, just educating people. And the reason why they said, "Oh, that's a perfect idea because four queer people, native young queer youths, in 1 week killed themselves, spread throughout reservations and small populations. That's just like, why are they doing this? Because they don't feel welcome. I mean, people always. I mean, I remember I wrote that article about Native American rednecks, whatever. You know, and it was Jake Tapper of CNN retweeted it. So I'm like, you know, I just thought I'd just slide under the rug. But then everyone saw it after that, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're Two Spirit, you're trans." So I was like, well, I guess I'm out of the closet, but it's kind of an odd way to come out of the closet. But at the same time, I was prepared for it. You know, I studied all this stuff as an artistic person, as a person, and I was in recovery, sobriety, and everything. It's like I have to be truthful to myself, otherwise that's just gonna eat me up, and I'm gonna relapse. And you know, but yeah, it was just that was one of the things. It's like there was she said one of the Stephen Bear Tutti anyway, what they said was, you know, one of the biggest examples of why they were suicidal themselves until they found there's this Denise Juno, who's a superintendent over school superintendent over in, is it Seattle? Yeah, and but yeah, they became a big shot politician in Montana, and that was uh yeah, and then as soon as they saw Denise Juno, they were just like, okay, there's a role model. I mean, but we don't never had a lot of those. And I kind of knew it had to like become a voice, almost like a vanguard, whatever. Just be like out there. I mean, I'm a very introverted person, so it was kind of tricky at first for me. But at the same time, I'm like, you know, I've been doing all this native activism and everything, and I had this voice already, and I had this journalism, so I'm gonna just keep using it, you know, because Two Spirit people, they were voices were very important, very detrimental to societies around these lands for thousands of years. That's my mentality. It's like we need to like raise those, elevate those voices again, and I'm like, It's like, yeah. So, I mean, it sounds kind of narcissistic, especially for a tribe like mine who practice great humility. But at the same time, it's kind of like it's a um, this is your burden. This is your responsibility to do it. I mean, you have to, yeah. And I do have like several articles. I just saw something scroll across. I was like, one of the most interesting ones where I told my story of coming out trans was called Dating While Trans Two Spirit. But anyway, that's
I have a list of questions, as you know,
yeah.
Adrian. So I'm going to just move over to land acknowledgements. Want to make sure we cover that today, because when this action team was in its planning, we learned that it was appropriate to recognize the traditional homelands of the people who lived here before we did, before colonization. And there are places where you can look up online whose traditional homelands are where. And then I heard that it's not a pro forma kind of thing. If you need to do it the right way. So, Adrian, would you give your opinion?
Yeah, that's one thing I always see, like a lot of native circles is like, I mean, land acknowledgements were good and everything, but then after a while, they noticed they started becoming, well, I guess we got to do this. Just kind of read off the quick script. Okay, land acknowledgement. And there was no like empathy behind it. There was this like, okay, that's out of the way. But it was like, that's what you have to realize when doing a land acknowledgement. It's like you're not just acknowledging the land, you're acknowledging the people as well. It's like, because like to pretend, oh, that's just history. Oh, that's in the past. At the same time, these people like survived the genocide. If you just do it, just a quick land acknowledgement without acknowledging people who lived here, or just knowing that, or at least feeling it, it just becomes another whitewashing of history of just, okay, we just now that we got that out of the way, and and it just like brings a lot of respect to the native people and voices and everything, just learning a little about their histories and everything. That's one of the things I always do. And I went up to the Salish, Missoula, Montana, and I learned like well, it's named after, it's like Missoula Taku or something, named after the river that goes through there, which means uh place of freezing water. But that's one of the yeah, that was like one of the interesting land acknowledgements I gave. It's like the Salish people in Missoula, around that area, the Bitterroot Valley. It's like they like to say they've been there for 10,000 years. And I was like, and then that's about the end of the Ice Age when they would have been able to live there. So it seems about right. So they lived in that area, so that they're really attached to this land. And one of the guys there, one of the artists, his name's like Corky Irwin or something. Um, he likes to say, all around this land, there isn't a spot where we haven't stepped before, where we haven't had our footprint that hasn't already been stepped on by our ancestors. That's how long we've been here. Like, huh, this is kind of like a powerful sentiment just to know that, at the same time, you can't just say, just like relegate the native people to like, oh, they're ghost, whatever, you know. And there was a lady in the lady in Deborah Juarez. She's Blackfeet, but lives in Seattle, and that was like one of her complaints. She's like a Seattle Council city member, and she had all these protesters at her house, and they were there for like weeks and everything. It was like a big political mess and everything, but she was just she was the one who pointed out, these are the same people that say, oh, honor and respect indigenous people, but they're not honoring me. They're not respecting me as a person because they're not, they're just like doing these land acknowledgements without feeling or whatever, just like knowing that there's like people behind it. There's like a literal genocide around that area and they killed people. We just like want to put that how do I always say it? It's a dark colonial shadow and they don't want to be part of that. So it just becomes almost like a you know, what do we say, white fragility thing to just kind of just kind of quick say it and sweep it under the rug, whatever. So yeah, I mean, we always have to acknowledge the history behind it too. When we're doing and even just like studying that little bit of history. Um I mean, yeah, it just humanizes the people. Yeah, and there's also like other things. One of my friends is like he wants to advance land acknowledgements. These are like treaty rights that people never recognize anymore. It's just like they weren't talking about just Standing Rock protest, whatever. It wasn't just about. I mean, it was about water is sacred, Bini Coney, but it was also these are treaty rights they own and earned, and that kind of gets swept to the wayside. But how did they earn those treaty rights? Why were these rights broken? And but I mean, they're yeah. I mean, these are treaty rights, nation to nation, and everything, constitutional and everything. So, but
Adrian, there's a question in the chat, and it asks, I have a question about land acknowledgements. In what parts of American popular culture could you imagine become normal and more adopted? In other words, in what instances have you seen land acknowledgements become normal? And where do you think there are other opportunities to acknowledge lands and folks native to them?
in popular culture.
It says, in what parts? Alec, do you want to elaborate any more on that?
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. I have just used for context land acknowledgements in the past, and I have found that they have that intention and the history and the knowledge to back it up from that standpoint. I guess my question was more getting at, like, where do you see, yeah, in what ways, maybe as a point of advice, could we use land acknowledgements in our day-to-day life or things of that nature? Does that clear it up a little bit?
Use it in day-to-day life. I do. I mean, just basically learning the history and everything. Yeah, I'm not getting what the question is really, but sorry.
It's all good. We can feel free to come back to it. I didn't want to derail you or anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just yeah. Sorry, my foot fell asleep too, so okay. I was distracted. Yeah.
Tamara, you might have to leave soon. Do you have any questions?
Thanks for giving me that opportunity, and thank you, Adrian. It's really enjoyable to be able to listen to your perspective. I think I'm really curious about your experience. That I want to know more about the experience of indigenous, what words did you use? Rednecks? I want to know more about any details about what it's like for you living both sort of in these in between worlds, right? Of being on I don't know, do you live on a reservation?
No, I have lived on reservations
Okay.
and everything. But
Okay.
that was back when I was not trans and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of weird. People it was always Native women who always like could sense that I was not, like, you smoke like a girl. I'm like, how am I supposed to smoke?
Yeah, so I would just love to, hear a story or two if you have a story that you feel comfortable sharing about what's it like for you as a Native person. Oh, sorry. I have a pet rat right here, so I'm sort of trying to watch her. Just somebody living in that really conservative space as a Native person and as a two spirits. Is that the term you used? Okay.
Yeah, Two Spirit person. Let's see. I guess how did it become so extreme about it? Was of course the boarding school mentalities really in early churches and everything really. But this area in particular, it was the Crow tribe who really adopted Pentecostal beliefs. It was because of one of their I guess I'll have to go back to the history. It was like the 1900s, 1918 or something. One of their uh, one of their medicine women really respected healers and everything. They adopted Christianity after like one of them they prayed with a minister or something, then there was a miracle or something. It's like, so why would they adopt the Christianity when before they were kind of skeptical of it and everything? Well, because the Pentecostalism was kind of appealing because it was more spiritual. And and then you can imagine like, oh, we pray and fast, and the story was, well, this Jesus prayed and fasted for 40 days. And so it's just kind of like in all these like the Holy Spirit and everything. And so it's kind of really appealing. And at the same time, it became like amongst the they weren't allowed to do anything. They were just like, you couldn't have gatherings, you couldn't have anything, but they couldn't stop them from going to have these gatherings on Sundays in churches. So they had these big Pentecostal revivals that would go all day, and people who didn't even like church or whatever just come to at least watch and be able to congregate with people. And and then it was like about the 1940s, there was another preacher that came through, and there's like, wow, these natives are really, really passionate about this and like everything. We should get them professional biblical training, whatever. They sent a group of them, like four of them, to Life Bible College in California, and a lot of the natives still go there. But one of them in particular, um, his name was Harold Carpenter. He became like, I'd say, the Billy Graham of natives. He's very charismatic, very powerful speaker in the 1950s. And so all of our um, parents and grandparents, they grew up in this. Been that he really set the guidelines. Before it was this kind of a mixture of native and Christianity beliefs, but he really set the guideline. Either follow native ways or or Christian ways. There's no in between. One of them's the devil, and one. So it just kind of there's kind of a break off where people just started growing up in that evangelical, really hardcore upbringing. I mean, of course, people didn't, but I don't want to say everyone, but a huge percentage of natives are like hardcore Christians now. So, and that was like my mom, and my mom in particular, she would have been like a medicine woman or whatever, would have inherited it from my grandpa, and then it just kind of stopped. And she had mentioned that I would have been like a medicine person, but she didn't do it. It was like her brother died or something. She just couldn't have that burden, and she was just in too much grief or whatever, and just kind of adopted Christianity, and that was that stopped the line. I kind of had to learn everything on my own much later. But yeah, I mean, a personal story is as soon as I came out trans, I knew it was going to be hard and everything because I had like a 9-year-old or 8-year-old daughter at the time, and I just kind of did it in this. I did it almost like I thought it was secretively. Just kind of went to some, I did the article and everything, and I started, but I posted a picture of myself. I had gone to some uh, meeting. There's like a non-discrimination ordinances to protect LGBTQ people. They were going to start that up. They had a meeting for that, and I said, "Well, I better go there." And that was like one of the first times I went out in public dressed in femme. I say, anyways. Right after that, I posted a picture and said, "Thank you for showing me support," and I tagged a couple people. Then my ex girlfriend, my daughter's mom, she saw that, and then she flipped out, and that's like one of the things is yeah, I haven't seen my daughter since. It's been like several couple of years now, and it's kind of like, and that's, I don't know, it's like one of those things that are, that's one of the most obvious striking things you always, think about, that clouds above you and everything. I'm like, now I got to go to court and everything finally and fill out paperwork and say, look, your argument against it is like, I would stop letting my daughter see their parent because they came out trans, which is, yeah, it's like, but, that's some of the things people are like, oh yeah, if people don't accept you, whatever. That's just, you don't need them, and they try to do that to make you feel better, but that's all I can think. Well, you don't want to become involuntarily estranged from your own family and everything. Um, my dad, he's white. Uh, my mother passed away like in 2014. But yeah, my dad, he's very evangelical. He's a church deacon for like 30 years and everything. So I grew up, this crazy, say, too much of a rebel, although I was a crazy artsy bohemian, whatever. But anyways, yeah, and he was like devastated and everything at first, but eventually, loves their child and gets over it and everything. So it's kind of yeah. But I had to dump a lot of people or whatever. So it's like it is, but you find new communities, whatever. But just me going out in public, I would say, I mean, that'd become more especially early in my transition. It was like when I was less femme looking, whatever. I was still kind of really bulky male, and I knew it was just like going through a gauntlet, whatever. But you knew you had, I don't know, I knew I had to go through it. I decided that, but it's like yeah, it was like I always almost felt bad for the people who had to hate out with me in public. It was almost like an act of civil disobedience or something, especially since trans people had like this target on their back and everything. So it's just kind of like, yeah, I mean, they're trying to pass legislation, and it switches from the gay marriage. Okay, that went through. Nothing we can do about that, and you became the target on your back for the culture war and everything. And that was right when you decided to come out trans and everything. And Montana is like went totally red state hardcore. So that's one of the first things they're going to do is attack abortion rights, and then trans rights. I'm waiting for them before they could get a bathroom bill, but I think they're going to try to do a bathroom bill. So it's like, oh, what do I do? I'm going to have to walk in their men's rooms wearing, dresses and like stuff. And it's going to be like awkward. Before it was just like, well, I don't know. It's like, yeah, politically, it's like a big storm, you know. It's like we're all relieved to see Trump come out, but locally in Montana, it's like some like trans people have actually just moved away from here rather than, know they're gonna have to put up with all that. So, but yeah, at the same
Excuse me,
time,
Adrian,
okay.
um, we have about 7 minutes left before we have to start closing because someone else is going to be on this line at 7. And Tamara, why don't you go ahead and say what you want to say?
Oh, I was just expressing my gratitude to you, Adrian, for sharing your story. Thank you. It's helpful to be able to hear some details.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like one of the ones that's called Dating While Two Spirit Trans. Yeah, I kind of do a whole little thing about it, but right now I'm writing a novel, whatever, like 50,000 words in it, all about, basing it off real life experiences, but of course, pulling other people's, a lot of it, I don't know. I want it to be really definitive. A lot of the stuff I talked about here. So that's one of my passions is writing fiction and art and everything. So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna hopefully, yeah. But yeah, that's one of the things I always do is I became more and more outgoing, just being seen all the time. Just so the populace, most it's like they said in this one, 80% of people have never met a trans person in society, but if they see someone like me just talking normally and making them laugh or learning, oh, that's cool or everything, just around here, that makes a big impact. So next time they're voting against you, that's at least in their head. These are not just some caricature of a meme I saw on Facebook, but actual real people. So that's why it's important. I had to become an activist in that sense, whatever. So
Kathy, you muted yourself again, I think.
Oh, I just muted myself. Okay.
Yeah.
This has been a, I knew this was going to be wonderful, but it's so heartwarming. Your generosity. That's something Northern Cheyenne are very generous also. Well, is there anything that we can do for you? One thing I thought was to let people know about your the anthology that you published. Okay, and Karina would like to let Karina talk.
I think you were getting to the question that I wanted to ask. What can we do to support you and your work?
I feel so like crass asking this, but I never got a stimulus check. I don't think I'm getting one. I do have a Venmo if you feel like donating. It's just Adrian Jawort. I think it's, I don't know, on PayPal and Venmo, just Adrian Jawort, however. Yeah, my name anyway. But let's see. Yeah, it's just how to support me. Yeah, I'm like, you can see this is an awkward question for me, but I mean, that's what, I mean, there's also like, yeah, buying my books, whatever. I would always start off with Off the Path, it's called, Montana American Indian Writers. That's the first one, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of evolves to a second anthology, whatever. But that's like, it really sets a tone of whatever art in natives. It's kind of really blunt and brutal, I'll say that. So very rated R.
Could we check back with you? It seems rather, what would be the word, truncated.
This conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have it, end.
I would be glad to talk whenever. It's just, that's what I do anyway. I mean, Humanities Montana Speakers Bureau person, which I haven't had a really chance to do with actual people and everything. So it's kind of fun to do it again. So
and Bill, do you want to say anything? Adrian, there's a lot there. I see there's a lot of messages in the chat, which I don't know if you can access.
yeah, I can see them. Says,
okay.
Thank you for your storytelling.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing with us. Thank you.
I have a quick question for Adrian before we finish the conversation. I do have questions, and I love that you're a journalist. That's my background. That before I started doing this work, I was a journalist, so I understand. You have magic in storytelling. If we have particular questions, is it okay that we send them to Kathy so that you can provide us with some answers, even if it's in writing?
Yeah, and yeah, I was like, Kathy thought it'd be perfect because I'm an open book and everything, and I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah. I think it has a lot to do just by sobriety and everything. I was always like a really honest, blunt person, but then after that, after I came out trans, it was just like, now am who I am. I'm gonna, so
Thank you.
I'll just answer your question, Kathy. And I too want to thank you for speaking today, Adrian, and appreciate your willingness to answer questions that could come up for us. And I do apologize that an hour doesn't seem like enough for the discussion that we're having. So,
Yeah.
but I think that having these types of conversations are really helpful in providing us a better understanding of the work that we do and in connecting with different communities. So I'm just really grateful for that. And I don't have any specific questions. It's just been really a pleasure to hear what you have to say and hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a couple minutes. Does anyone else want to have a burning desire to say something? We've got 5
thank you,
minutes.
Adrian. I guess I would just ask, it would be really helpful for our work, as people alluded to, if you could touch briefly on the intersections of environmental justice, what that means to you, and maybe what justice for Indigenous communities looks. So any intersections between those two topics.
Yeah, I mean, as like I say, natives have always like respected the earth. You know, it sounds like really hippie-ish and everything, but at the same time, it's like, you know, to us, everything is alive, everything is connected. As you know, we're no better than the water because or the rocks, whatever. It's all alive and everything. We have to respect it and everything. I mean, it sounds very I don't know, generic, but but yeah, that's as we saw at Standing Rock, whatever, that was like one of the things that really took off. People said, you know, how powerful the oil companies were and how whatever they were going to do whatever they could, whether than just honor a treaty, whatever. A quick story about that is that one day they were attacked by dogs and everything, and then they kind of drove them off. But the story behind that is they had traveled 30 miles on Labor Day weekend, which they never worked on weekends, just to bulldoze this area where they had marked for a grave that it was like the thing of the Big Dipper, which is meant there was a chief that was like really, really high ranking there. And they did that. They bulldozed it out of the way. As soon as they were like filed the paperwork, the oil company went all the way over there and did that. So they might have driven them off, and everyone was celebrating. Yeah, we won that battle. But I mean, it was almost like they lost the war that day. That always gets slid under the radars. Any narrative I've noticed. There was like someone wrote a book about it. Actually, right here. Raise Your Voice. I guess the guy was a Time magazine editor. Anyways, I edited his chapter on Standing Rock, and I said you have to put that in there because that's something that's always overlooked. Is like how the oil company traveled 30 bulldozers that far just to get this specific area, and it wasn't just like the normal whatever. They just like wiped out this whole area. About time they had the security guys there with the dogs and everything biting people, but at the same time it was like, okay, we're done. We destroyed that and just went about their day. And after that they had like almost no legal precedent and everything, but it was just like, holy crap, why is it and I was like with a few journalists that ever really said we need to put that in whatever spotlight and everything. But we're up for Indian country today and everything. But of course the narrative, I mean, it's all good and everything becomes the protesters being attacked by dogs and everything, but no one knows why the oil people just decided to do that day. So it's just kind of just a total lack of disrespect and everything of Native peoples,
Can I thank you, Adrian, and I should jump in. I want to be sure before the meeting needs to end to confirm the next meeting time, and it's going to be a different Zoom number too. So Kathy, you want to share about that?
We'll be moving to the 4th Monday of each month. And our next speaker then is February 4th Monday. And she is a tribal member from Pine Ridge and Grovant, which is Ani, in Fort Belknap, and works with wellness and suicide prevention. And so this will not be the same Zoom in February. Karina?
Yes, we will be putting the new line on the calendar item in community, just like we did with this one. So yeah, so just keep us in mind and reserve your fourth Monday for us so that we can continue hosting these programs. So thank you.
Thank you again, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Adrian. Bye.
Adrian.
Bye, everybody.